Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Oh, and dear subscribers, don't forget to give us some hype points. It really helps us keep creating more stories just for you. Now, let's get started. I didn't choose the roof because it was safe. I chose it because it was the only place where the crush of people couldn't follow me on day one. The grocery store had a fixed ladder bolted to the loading dock wall. I climbed with a backpack biting into my shoulders, and 3 times thought I'd slip when shoes skidded on the rungs. I remember reaching for the last bar, locking an arm over the parapet, and pulling myself over the lip with the dull certainty that if I fell, no one would catch me. I rolled onto gravel in hot black membrane, chest heaving, and listened to what the world sounded like from a rooftop. Honking horns, shouts turned to a massed hum, and a new constant, like shoes dragging on asphalt in every direction. I pushed the ladder off with both feet. It screeched, pivoted, and smacked the dock in a burst of echoes that felt too loud. When the ladder went down, so did the last easy way up to me. I used a chunk of broken cinder block to chip away at the upper bolts until they snapped, and the ladder lay useless on the ground like a caution I could not take back. The roof was a map I had to learn. The membrane pitched just enough to send water toward drains. 2 big HVAC units hummed on the first day, then coughed and went dead on the second. They were aluminum skins around simple systems, fans, coils, and sheet metal chases. There was a hatch under a steel cage at the back, locked from the inside. 2 skylights, each the size of a dining table, bubbled up like clear blisters. If I lay flat and pressed my face to one, I could see aisle numbers floating in the dim store below. Signs for pasta and rice, canned goods, and seasonal. My backpack had the strangest mix of things. The kind of kit you get when you don't plan to run. A small water filter straw still in plastic. A folding knife with a bent pocket clip and a screwdriver set I'd kept in the truck glove box for years. A cheap walkie-talkie and a blister pack I bought on a whim the previous Christmas. My plan then was a winter hiking trip with friends. A pair of MYAR emergency blankets, folded tighter than a wallet. A battered solar battery bank with a little panel on top that promised to charge itself in the sun. A spool of fishing line I had thrown in for a river trip that never happened. The line would turn out to be the most valuable thing in the bag. I barricaded the roof access without opening the hatch. Pallets sat along the parapet, some with shreds of shrink wrap clinging to them. I dragged 5 and leaned them against the cage over the hatch, wedged metal shelving between the pallets. Then fed fishing line through the slats, and tied knots I trusted from a lifetime of small problems. Trucker's hitch to cinch, clove hitch to anchor, 2 half hitches to finish. It wasn't pretty, but if someone got the hatch open from below, they'd be pushing into a tangle of wood and metal under tension. I stacked a few slabs of broken sidewalk I found near the vent to add weight, and left it there. A small fortress against a door I wouldn't use. The store had 2 skylights. On the 3rd day, hunger leaned on me heavier than fear. I picked the one above the canned goods and lay on my stomach to study the frame. The dome sat in an aluminum curb. The curb was screwed into a wooden upstand that had been flashed into the roof. The fasteners were riddled with caul. I took the screwdriver and scraped the sealant away. Loosened each screw a quarter turn at a time and learned the rhythm of roof work. Turn, rest, listen, scan. No sudden movements, no unnecessary sound. When the frame finally gave, I slid it back just enough to make a gap. I lowered a length of paracord I scavenged from the roof first aid kit, another miracle, and tied it off to a compressor shroud. I fed the cord through the shoulder straps of my pack and lowered it first. Then followed, feet searching for the top of a shelf. I felt the steel flex and cack under my weight, and then crouched between boxes of aluminum foil and light bulbs. The air inside had the stale chill of a closed car. I used a small mirror from the cosmetics aisle to check corners like I'd seen in videos I never thought I'd use in real life. I moved quiet between aisles, stepping heel to toe, avoiding fallen packaging. No one was inside that day. On the fourth day, someone had been. A display of snack cakes had been knocked over, and there were footprints in a spill of sugar they tracked from the baking aisle to the service door. By the fifth, I wasn't the only one to discover the skylight trick. I kept the mirror habit, checked the end of every shelf, and made my weekly run when the light outside told me the street was empty of afternoon wanderers. I built a life on the roof exactly fast enough to not fall apart. I cut 2 plastic totes in half and made them into open bins, then used the condensate pen of a dead HVAC unit as a gutter. I wedged it under the drip edge and angled it toward the bins. When the first rain came, I taped my wash sheets into funnels and anchored the corners under gravel, so the water ran clean into 5-gallon buckets I'd hoisted up from the automotive aisle with fishing line and patience. I skimmed out roof grit with a t-shirt, ran water through a layer of coffee filters into a clean container, then boiled it on a canister of sterno I found buried in seasonal camping gear. I kept the filter straw as a backup. Even when I learned to trust my process, I always kept a backup. Food came from the rows beneath me, but not the neat feast everyone imagines when they picture a grocery store. The produce rotted instantly. The dairy expired. The freezer aisle went soft, and then worse. On day 7, I held my breath and walked past the meat coolers. The smell had weight that pushed me back a step. After that, I avoided the perimeter where compressors had once hummed, and now sat silent. Cans and boxes saved me. I rationed like it was math. About 2,000 calories a day the first week, down to 200 by the second. 1 main meal midday. Small snacks in the morning and night. Oats, beans, instant noodles, peanut butter, crackers, canned tuna, and chicken. I found a crate of mixed seeds in the garden section and remembered how a friend once sprouted them for a salad. I washed 2 plastic takeout bowls, spread damp paper towels inside, sprinkled seeds, and kept them under a Miar tent for warmth. In 3 days, I had sprouts. They tasted like hope and something green. I started more every week. Shelter was simple engineering. The roof membrane could cook you by noon and bleed heat by midnight. I pulled a heavy blue tarp tight against the back wall where the parapet rose, set a pole, and made a lean-to with the opening facing east. I lined the inside with Miar blankets, dull side out, to avoid reflections at night. I set down cardboard to insulate from the black surface underneath. I found a sleeping bag that had somehow escaped early looting, probably because it was wedged behind overstock, and tucked it into my nest. I learned the sound of gravel underfoot versus the heavier noise of someone stepping onto the hatch cage. I learned what the roof sounded like in wind, and what it sounded like when something new arrived. Defense grew from the idea that I might not always be the only one up here. The first tool was a length of rebar taped to a broken broom handle with packing tape and zip ties. It was a spear if you squinted, and something to keep distance if someone came at me on hands and knees. I staged a fire extinguisher by the skylight in case I needed a burst of powder to blind someone. I took from the landscaping pallet a stack of river stones the store had been selling as decorative garden accents and lined them along the parapet in places I could reach quickly. If someone started climbing the brick ledge with fingers spread, I could make it rain just enough deterrence to make them reconsider. By week 3, the pattern outside had a rhythm. The infected were not a wave, but a tide. They wandered past like commuters with no destination, sometimes in 2s and 3s, sometimes as a quiet drift of a dozen. The grocery store drew them after the freezers warmed and the meat turned. Smells seeping out around rubber door gaskets. Crows found the perimeter first. Dogs came next, ribs showing, eyes bright with survival. The dogs brought noise, and the noise brought the infected. I watched from behind an HVAC shroud and kept my head below the parapet line. A battery radio I'd found in the office picked up a voice one afternoon claiming temporary containment zones were being set up around the interstate. The broadcast looped every hour, then every 6, then stopped. When it went silent, the world grew quieter still. I kept a routine like a religion. At dawn, I checked the parking lot with binoculars I'd pulled off a high shelf in sporting goods. At midday, I sorted water and laid out wet clothes to dry. At sunset, I shut down everything that could reflect or glint. The walkie-talkie battery held a charge just long enough for me to learn that the local channel was full of static and brief bursts of panic that ended abruptly. I turned it off to save it in case I ever heard a different kind of voice. On the night that matters, I had been on the roof for just under 5 weeks. I knew the roof sounds the way you know a house if you grew up in it. At 2:15 a.m., a new sound appeared. The first time I heard it, I thought it was wind teasing a loose piece of metal into a note. 3 slow measures, a human breath behind it. A tune, not words, not random. It came from the edge of the parking lot by the 3 streetlights that had burned steady for a week after the power cut, drained themselves, and then died. The whistling was clean and unhurried. It lasted 40 seconds, stopped, and didn't come back that night. I lay with my head on my pack and counted my heartbeat until I fell asleep. The next night, it returned at the same time. 2:15 a.m., the same tune, the same duration. I got to the parapet with my body flat and peered over. Nothing moved beyond the shape of cars fossilized where people had left them. The sound finished, and I held my breath until my lungs asked a second time. On the third night, I moved from scared to planning. I tied a line from the parapet to the base of the nearest HVAC unit and looped it through the strap of a small mirror. The line was slack. The mirror lay flat. At 2:10 a.m., I slid the mirror up and over the parapet just enough to see the world at a 90 degrees angle. I watched the blind spot where the flare of the parapet blocked my view and saw nothing but the darker dark of the street. At 2:15 a.m., the whistle drifted into the parking lot again. It was close, but not too close. Across the lane, near the cluster of carts I had once considered rating for their wheels. I followed the sound with the mirror inch by inch. All I saw was the shadow of the cart corral and the outline of a delivery truck frozen at the dock. The tune stopped. I reeled the mirror back and left it coiled beside me. Fear becomes a shape you can hold if it happens at the same time every night. After a week of the whistle, I could stack cans by it. I could wake 5 minutes before it, sit with my feet crossed, and mark on a notebook where I thought it might be coming from. The questions built in a column I underlined twice. Is it a signal to someone else? Is it bait? Is it somebody who wants me to know they can come closer but choose not to? Is it simply a person in a routine like mine, clinging to a habit because habits keep you whole? I watched for patterns. 2 of everything is coincidence. 3 is a plan. At 2:15 a.m. for 7 nights, the whistle fell into the parking lot. After the 3rd night, the number of infected close to the store in the early morning increased. On the 4th, someone tried the rear service store and rattled it with 2 sharp pulls and then left. On the 6th, I saw the glow of a cigarette ember flare across the street behind the self-storage fence and then vanish. On the 7th, a light blinked on twice from a 3rd-story apartment window in the block beyond the strip mall. I marked it down, but didn't move. I didn't answer. If there was a test happening, I wasn't going to raise my hand too early. Lighting a rooftop changes the night sky for anyone watching. I made a deal with myself. No lights above the parapet line. Inside, my tarp leaned too. I used a small battery lamp just long enough to eat. I lined the lamp with a cardboard collar, so no spill showed sideways. When I needed to move at night, I used a solar garden light with tape over the top. If I needed to step to the parapet, I counted steps from familiar places and kept a hand on the roof units, finding them by feel. The second week of the whistling, I tested a reply that wasn't a reply. At noon, when the sun was high and the glare could be anything, I took the mirror back out. I flashed in 3 quick bursts toward the apartment window that had blinked, not toward the place the whistling came from. A different node in whatever this network of strangers might be. I waited. Nothing answered. That day or the day after. On the third day, I saw smoke from a distant chimney on the same line. I told myself that meant something, and then told myself it could mean nothing. Because silence wasn't a strategy forever, I started a second plan, a night move. Escapes are made with a route, not a wish. The rooftop connected to the pharmacy by one long throw too far to jump. The pharmacy roof connected to the hardware store roof by a narrow span over a breezeway that once led to a donut shop that had offered a 2-for-1 on weekends. The hardware store roof butted up against a low line of professional offices, the kind with frosted glass and gentle music that felt like safety in the old world and like empty echo chambers now. From there, if I made it, the self-storage facility had a 2-story office building with a flat roof, and then rows of roll-up doors that made a corrugated landscape I could cross if I was willing to sprint a few steps on the ground between blocks. That plan required ropes, anchors, and a willingness to fall. I made a trial. I took the fire hose that hung in a red cabinet near the compressor room and tied a figure-8 follow-through around a roof joist that punched through the membrane under a built-up curb. I lowered the hose to the pharmacy roof and pulled it taut. It barely reached, but barely was enough. I climbed down with my arms doing more work than my legs, planted my shoes on tar and gravel, and lay flat across the seam of the 2 buildings, listening for breath or shuffle below me. The pharmacy roof held. I climbed back up, cheeks salt-sticky with fear and focus, and cut the hose to leave a length I could drop again in a hurry. The whistling shifted on the 15th night. It came from the same general place, but punctuated itself with a pattern. 3 notes, pause. 3 notes, long pause. 3 notes. I recognized it both as something from the old world and as something different now. It had the rhythm of attention, like a tone to open a radio channel. I clicked the walkie-talkie on, volume low, antenna tucked against my palm. I heard nothing but static. I slid the switch off, held the radio until the plastic warmed to my hand, then set it under the tarp with the battery wire separated to keep it from draining. The next day, I found a note. The note was not addressed, not signed, and that's how I knew it was for me. I almost didn't see it. It waited under the lip of the roof where the ladder had once been. Someone had threaded it into a gap in the brick with a sliver of plastic to hold it against the wind. I saw it when I leaned over to check the parapet seam. The paper was torn from a receipt roll, narrow and curled. The ink, a faint gray from whatever thermal printer had fed it years ago. I used a bent coat hanger to snag it and pull it up gently, trying to imagine the patience it took to place it. The note said, "If you want to live, leave this roof before next Tuesday. We come at dawn. Stay low. Follow the Carden Corral. Shadows east. Don't wave. Don't call out. We will whistle at 2:15 a.m. once more to confirm. If you move, move after it stops." It was Thursday. Tuesday felt like a dare. I didn't trust the note, but I couldn't ignore it. I set it under a brick in the tarp shadow and made a list. Reasons to go. Roof membranes age. Water adds weight. The grocery store smells draw things I can't control. My food is finite. A group could mean protection. My sleep is already broken. Reasons to stay. You can hold a roof with 2 hands. The skylight is a controlled choke point to supply. I understand the distances here. A group can also be a trap. The note could be bait to draw me into a lane for someone with a rifle. The whistling has already mapped my habits. I spent that day making the roof more defensible, as if I planned to stay. I also coiled the hose and tested the grip on my gloves, as if I planned to go. The sun traced its path, and I stopped thinking in big words like trust and safety. I started counting in seconds and steps. That night at 2:15 a.m., the whistle came, and I lay still. I watched the far curb, the end of the delivery lane, the place where a low boxy car had been sitting with a missing front wheel for 3 weeks. I saw a shape move behind it. Human height, not hunched, a silhouette with shoulders. It leaned, and then vanished. The whistle ended. I waited 10 minutes, 20, 30, an hour. If I was going to leave, this window after the sound was when I'd do it, to match the note's guidance. I didn't leave. I slept an hour and woke feeling the pull of a decision I had delayed. I used the next daylight to make the roof function, whether I was on it or not. I rigged the water gutter so it would continue to fill barrels if it rained, and if it overflowed, it would carry excess to the drains, not pull and bow the membrane. I taped the Maillard funnels in an overlap so they could flap without tearing. I set the sprouting bowls under a mesh crate so crows couldn't get at them if they found a gap. I taped a note under the sleeper pallet where I kept the sleeping bag. If you read this, take all the water and food and do not try the hatch. The floor below is unsafe. It was true enough. It would also steer anyone who found the roof after me away from the place I entered, which would protect someone who didn't know about falling shelves and dark corners. On Monday, ahead of Tuesday's decision, I ran one last scavenging descent. I lowered the pack and climbed into the aisle like it was the first time and might be the last. The store below me had grown different in subtle ways. Dust had settled into footprints that weren't mine. A display of pet food was missing 3 small bags I had been ignoring. I stepped slowly, mirror extended, and turned toward the office to see if any paperwork meant anything now. It didn't. The manager's desk had a mug with a slogan about Mondays, and a paper calendar stuck on the first week of chaos. In a locked drawer, I found a small lockbox with a snap lid. Inside was a compact revolver and 2 speed loaders with soft rubber grips. There was no note, just the cold shape of a policy in a metal box. I don't like firearms and don't like not having them when everyone else does. I checked the cylinder. Clean, lightly oiled, and loaded, closed it, and put the gun in the very bottom of my pack under a bag of oats and a coil of rope. On the way back to the skylight, I stopped in Health and Beauty and took an extra compact mirror. Mirrors had been more useful than almost anything else, and I could see losing one under stress. I topped off my kit with a few more coffee filters, a roll of heavy tape, and an extra lighter that felt like the kind of small thing that saves you on a bad day. I was halfway up the rope when a shadow crossed the skylight. My body reacted before my mind did. I let the pack hang against the shelf and slid 1 foot back to the metal to make myself smaller. The shadow paused, then moved on. The sound it made wasn't a step so much as a weight, settling on a roof, light enough not to crunch gravel, heavy enough that the membrane gave under it. I held my breath until my lungs hurt. The shadow moved again. It could have been a bird. It could have been a person. It could have been nothing but a cloud. I climbed the rest of the way fast and quiet, slid the skylight back into place, and lay flat on the roof, counting 300 in my head. When I finally let air in and out, the count had gone past 600. I stayed there until dusk, and then crawled under the tarp. Tuesday arrived. At 2:15 a.m., the whistle came. It did not stop after 40 seconds. It went for a full minute and then cut. I was already wearing gloves and had the hose coiled. I didn't move. 5 minutes later, a light blinked twice from the apartment window. A cigarette ember flared by the storage fence. A shape moved by the boxy car. The parking lot was aboard, and someone had set pieces at the corners while I was sleeping. I told myself a rule. If they expect me to move east, I move west. If they expect me to climb down, I climb across. If they expect me to call out or wave, I count breath and stay quiet. I left the roof, not by the ladder side and not by the hose point I attested to the pharmacy. I moved to the other skylight, the one over the housewares aisle. I opened it, lowered the pack, and slid down into stacks of plastic bins and brooms. I moved through the store to the garden center, lifted the roll-up door just enough to crawl under, and then stopped in the dark to listen. I anchored a second hose I had prepared to a loading dock bumper and padded out across a narrow alley to the back of the hardware store. The alley had once been a place for pallets and smokers on break. Now it was a canyon with a carpet of leaves. I pulled the hose taut, kicked a crate to wedge it, and climbed hand over hand until my chest pressed against the next roof, and my feet found a lip I hadn't felt in daylight. Once there, I lay flat and looked back. The grocery store roof had a shape on it now, crouched near the parapet where I had once set the mirror. The shape shifted, stood, and then crouched again. It looked toward the east and then toward the west. I understood that finally, completely, whoever had been whistling knew the roof was occupied, had built a map of where I moved, and had not yet discovered that tonight I wasn't there. On the hardware store roof, I found my second wind. The roof was newer, gravel bonded in tar that held heat even at night. I crawled to the parapet and peered into the lane that separated the store from the professional offices. It was empty. Across the gap, the office roof sat a foot lower than mine. It was an easy down and a hard back up, which was another way of saying it was a route for people who didn't plan to return. I tied off the coil, lowered it, and let myself slide to the next roof with my legs outstretched so I didn't fall. I crossed 3 shallow roofs that way, staying low, pausing to check angles. Behind me, the grocery store roof had more shapes now. The whistling didn't come again at 3:15 a.m. or 4:15 a.m. The window in the apartment building didn't flash. It didn't need to. The moves were in play. At the end of the offices, the self-storage facility stretched away like an army of corrugated metal. The office building had a higher roofline and a glass front. I saw movement inside that I understood as my own reflection, only after I pulled back, heart hammering. I waited 2 full minutes, then moved to the far corner and looked down into the lot. The rows formed narrow corridors between units. A chain-link fence with barbed wire capped to the perimeter. The gate on the street was closed with a heavy chain, but not locked. It was just looped through and crossed back on itself in a hurry. If I could cross the lot and scale the fence at the far end, I could reach a narrow service road that ran behind a line of townhomes, where I had once seen a back porch light flicker in the first week. If I could do that, I could find a vantage that wasn't a roof I had taught someone else to watch. I took the pack off, clipped it to a line so it would hang at my back and not flop in front, and lowered myself from the office roof into shadow. The pavement was clean, the air chemical with the smell of old paint. I hugged the building and moved along the row until I found the ladder rungs welded to an electrical conduit I had seen from above, and climbed back to the office roof. I repeated that dance twice more. The down to check a lane, the up to check the wide view, until I was convinced there was no immediate movement, or the movement was better at hiding than I was at seeing. I dropped to the ground one more time and crossed the open lot at a controlled walk. Running calls to things. Walking is how people who belong somewhere move. I reached the fence, lifted the chain, and slid out under the last loop, then ducked to keep my pack from catching on the lower wire. I crossed the service road and moved along the line of townhouses, listening for breath, for quiet radio static, for the soft click of a safety. All I heard was wind. I found the back porch with the chimney. I tapped the mirror twice to catch a sliver of the moon. Nothing answered. I moved on. I didn't sleep that day. I hid under a deck and let my body shiver the adrenaline off while my mind ran through everything I hadn't seen. I had food for a week at strict ration. I had water for 2 days. The townhouses had curtains that moved in the air from misaligned windows. I could have forced a door or a basement window, but every door in this town felt like a stage with a spotlight. I waited for the evening to give me a dim gray that wasn't yet night, and then slipped into the green belt behind the houses. The grass had gone to seed. A footpath cut by dog walkers before and deer now ran east toward a drainage ditch that paralleled the road to the interstate. I kept to the far edge and let trees cover me when they could. Twice. I stopped fast when I heard footfalls, but both sounds ended as deer bolting 50 yards away when they caught my scent. Near midnight, I found a small park with 3 picnic tables and a grill. A pavilion roof would have been a welcome roof if roofs hadn't lately felt like traps. I stayed outside, sat with my back against a cedar tree where roots buckled the soil, and watched for the shape of people. Then, because habit wins, I slept anyway, one hand on my pack strap, mind listing points I didn't want to forget. In the morning, a voice said, "Don't stand up fast," and I learned that even good routines have gaps. The voice sounded like someone who had been doing this a while, calm, low, conversational. It came from 10 yards left and a bit behind, which told me the speaker had watched me long enough to choose a spot I couldn't cover. I lifted my hands, palm up slowly, and kept my eyes forward. "I'm not armed," I said. It was true in the way facts are true at specific moments. The revolver sat in my pack. The rebar spear was back on my old roof. "Everyone's armed now," the voice said. "What matters is what you think it's for." The speaker stepped around into view. A woman in her late 30s, hair tied back, jacket clean enough to say she had a base, a compact radio clipped to her belt, no visible rifle, which didn't mean there wasn't one nearby. She had a scar across the knuckles on her left hand like she'd lost a fight with a door at some point and won anyway. "I'm not interested in yours," I said. "That's a start," she said, and came closer, hands away from her body, palms slightly open. "Name?" "Alex," I said because the truth felt like a better shield. Then a lie I might forget. "I'm Mara," she said. "We've been watching you." I breathed once, lowly. "That doesn't make me feel safer." "We didn't whistle for you," she said. I found my breath hold again. "We whistled for them." "Who?" "The ones who empty roofs when they're tired of waiting," she said. "You saw shapes on your roof. You felt watched. You were." She looked at the ground for a moment, as if she was rehearsing words she'd said before. "We're a small group. We moved between buildings. We scavenged the places that don't smell from the outside. We noticed the whistling pattern a week ago. It wasn't a song, it was a coordination signal. 3 notes, pause to mark positions. We answered in a way they'd expect, then changed the time by a minute. One night they adjusted. We wanted to know if they'd give us their timing or make us give them ours. They gave us theirs." "Your note," I said. "We didn't leave a note," she said. "We don't commit plans to paper." I felt the world tilt at a different angle. "Someone left me a note." Her jaw tightened. "Then we have a third party, either a survivor who thought they were doing you a favor, or someone else who wanted you to move when you'd be exposed." "Did you?"
Not as they asked, I said. I went a different way. That's probably why you're standing here, she said. We can walk and talk if you want, or we can part ways. We don't recruit, we advise. But she looked at my hands. You look like you haven't slept.
My sleep schedule was built around a whistle, I said. I need to change it, she nodded. There's a place on the other side of the drainage ditch where the ground rises, an old maintenance shed. We use it as a waypoint sometimes. You can come to the edge with me and decide. No trap, no rush. Why help? I asked. Because if the ones who hunt get stronger, everyone else gets weaker, she said. And because I was on a roof like yours on my first week, and someone helped me down without asking for anything but quiet. We moved through the grass with the ease of a plan she had walked before. She pointed out the tripwire cans she had set between trees, the kind I had built with fishing line and tin. She stepped over them like they were part of a puzzle she enjoyed. She led me to a culvert where water sighed through a drain, and then up the far bank to a low building of concrete block. She did not open the door. She knocked twice, waited, and then opened it slowly. Inside it smelled like dust and oil. The room had shelves with plastic bins that once held spare parts. Now they held jars of beans and rice, bandages, batteries sorted by charge level and labeled with strips of tape. A solar panel leaned against the far wall beside a car battery and a small inverter. A man in his 50s with a gray beard sat on a folding chair cleaning the chain of a bicycle with a rag and a bottle of oil. He looked up and nodded to Mara. His eyes slid to me with the calculating calm of someone who has seen surprises and gotten through most of them. "This is Alex," Mara said, "from the grocery roof near the strip, not one of the whistlers." "Good," he said, and went back to the chain. "I'm Ben." "Hi," I said, feeling every stupid thing I could say crowding to the front of my mouth, and choosing wisely to say nothing else. I stood near the door and watched how their eyes moved. They checked the window, the hinges, the simple latch, and the corners where the floor met the wall. They were both wearing earplugs around their necks, like they knew loud changes hurt as much as quiet ones help. "You look like you have 1,000 questions," Mara said. "Pick one." "Who are the whistlers?" I asked. "We don't know their names," Ben said. "We know what they do. They go rooftop to rooftop and wait. They mark places with sounds. They move at dawn when people are sleepy, and at dusk when people are setting up to sleep. They like to see how you live before they decide how to strip it." "Bandits," I said. "Too easy a word," Mara said. "Words make us lazy. They are observant, disciplined, and patient. They don't rush. They watch patterns. We call them the Watchers because that's what they do. The whistle is part of their language." "Why watch so long?" I asked. "Because the more they learn, the less they risk," Ben said. "If they know your water schedule, they know when your reserves are lowest. If they know your food inventory, they know how long you'll resist. If they know your defenses, they know where to push." "They know my roof," I said, feeling the statement sit in me like a stone. "They might," Mara said, "but now you don't live there." "I left a note," I said, and told them what it said. Mara's eyebrows went up in the middle and down at the ends. "Clever," she said softly. "It keeps strangers away from the hatch, which is a smart safety warning. It also tells anyone who finds it that there was a hatch and that you knew it was dangerous. That could be either good or bad. Good if it keeps them from a fall. Bad if it tells someone with a flashlight where to look." "I didn't think of that," I said. "No one thinks of everything," Ben said not unkindly. "We all leave trails. The trick is to leave ones you can live with." Mara poured water into a tin cup and handed it to me. "Drink slowly," she said, "and then tell us everything about your last week." I told them the times, the movements, the shapes on the roof, the smoking ember against the fence, the double blink in the apartment window. I described the layout of the roof, the pallets, the improvised spear, the water catchment. When I finished, Ben asked his first real question. What did the tune sound like? He said, 3 notes, I said. A slow rise, hold, then drop. The same every night. Ben nodded. They keep it simple to keep mistakes from giving them away. It's not a song, it's a position marker. We cracked the meaning of one pattern 3 days ago. 3 notes, pause. 3 notes, long pause. First note identifies the position. Second, the direction of travel. Third, the action. We think. We're not certain. What's the action for me? I asked. For you, the action is a test, Mara said. You did well. You didn't move when told. You moved when it was right. I waited for the ask that comes after a compliment. It didn't come. Mara sat on the edge of the workbench, elbows on her knees. You have choices, she said. You can move on. We can point you to a safe lane to the river where some people have made a quiet camp. You can stay here for a day and sleep, or you can help us for a bit, and we help you for a bit. There's a pharmacy across from your roof with a back door we think still has a simple bolt. We need gauze and a specific antibiotic if any remains. We don't take more than we can carry, and we don't risk for items that aren't essential. What's the pay? I asked. Not because I wanted it, but because I wanted to hear how they measured value. Food for 2 days, water for 2, and a lesson you can't buy, Ben said. We'll show you how we read a block and how to move through it without making ripples. I didn't answer right away. I thought of the roof, the bins, the sprouts I had set in their cradle. I thought of the note that wasn't theirs. I thought of the shapes that had learned my posture, how I sat by the parapet at night to look at the line of streetlights. I'll help, I said. Then I might move on. I don't think I want to be anywhere long enough to become a pattern for someone else. That's the smartest thing you've said. Mara said, eat, then rest. We go at noon and not at night. Daylight reads cleaner. The watchers prefer edges and shadows. I slept for 2 hours on a piece of cardboard laid over a metal shelf. When I woke, the world had the soft clarity that comes after you've accepted that you won't get perfect safety and are making do with what you have. We set out with packs light enough to sprint if needed. Ben carried a coil of thin rope and a hook made from a bent angle bracket. Mara carried a pair of bolt cutters wrapped in cloth. I carried the pack with my revolver at the bottom, where it belonged, until it didn't. We didn't take streets. We took the spaces where landscaping crews used to walk between buildings and the narrow gravel bands under windows where only spiders lived. Mara taught me to stop before corners and look low first, then middle, then high. She showed me how to study reflections and broken glass to see around a second corner. Ben pointed out scuff marks on the dust where someone had slid a foot under a door recently, and an even smear where a cartwheel had gone past in the last 2 days. When we reached the pharmacy, we didn't touch the front door. We went around the side where the delivery came in twice a week in the old world. The back door had a lever handle and a bolt about belly height. It had been used recently. The deadbolt still sat retracted in the door edge, the way a tired clerk might leave it after a last shipment, thinking they'd be back in the morning, as they had been every morning before. Mara slid the bolt cutter jaw into the gap and levered the bolt just enough to pop it without force. The sound was a soft click, the sound of a good plan. She led, Ben covered. I watched our rear and took a position I could defend with a burst of motion instead of a burst of noise. Inside, the pharmacy smelled cleaner than the store had. Alcohol, cardboard, and the faint sweetness of something that had broken weeks ago and dried into the shelving. We moved along the back wall, where the small white boxes sat alphabetically. Amoxicillin if it's here, Ben said, and sterile dressings. We won't waste time reading labels. We want items with dates, best as recent as possible. We don't take controlled substances. They're a magnet for people who don't think ahead. We found 2 boxes of dressings and a blister pack of antibiotics. I grabbed a small bottle of antiseptic and 3 rolls of medical tape. I took a spare pair of tweezers and a small flashlight with dull batteries. That might be good for one surprise. Mara found a bottle of hand sanitizer and did the math in her head about weight versus worth, then took it. We froze when we heard the softest sound. Rubber on tile. The steps were slow and deliberate. Not the shuffle of an infected, not the nervous trot of a scavenger. We moved to the wall, lowered our heads, and waited. A shape passed the end of the aisle. I saw a sleeve clean and a hand rough. The hand held a radio. It clicked twice, softly. A code that wasn't mine. Mara tapped the back of my hand twice, the smallest signal, and pointed to the far exit with 2 fingers. We slid along the wall. The shape in the next aisle stopped. The radio clicked once more. A second shape answered the click from further inside the store. A third answered from behind us, near the door we'd used, though outside or in the loading area, I couldn't tell. We moved. Quiet wasn't enough anymore. It was speed without sound. We avoided the back door and instead took the route past the consultation window to the staff break room. The window to the dumpster area had a chain. Ben cut it with a single practiced snip, and we slipped into bright light and the smell of paper and plastic. We hugged the wall. The air looked empty, and it wasn't. A shadow fell across the far corner of the chain link fence. The hand with the radio appeared, and then the person attached to it. Tall, lean, eyes hidden behind a brim. The figure saw us, and I saw the moment where surprise wanted to move them forward. Instead, they brought the radio up and clicked 3 times and then waited. They didn't draw a weapon. They didn't rush. They watched. We didn't sprint. Sprinting wobbles. We moved fast, low, a 3-body line. We reached the edge of the building and turned, not the way they wanted, toward the street, but back toward the narrow walkway between the pharmacy and the self-storage where the watchers would be less comfortable. At the corner, a man stepped out with a long jacket and steady feet. He didn't raise a gun. He didn't need to. He blocked the easy road. He smiled without showing teeth. A professional gesture. "Good morning," he said like we were neighbors. Mara didn't answer. She looked at his hands. He kept them empty. That didn't mean anything, but said he wanted it to. We angled away and he matched the angle. The figure with the radio kept us in the V. "Trade," the man said. "Help for help." "We're not the helping kind," Mara said. "Everyone is when they're tired," he said. He made a small noise then, not a whistle, but a breath with shape to it, and I felt the hair on my arms lift. It was a sound you could miss if you had never heard it. After 2 weeks I could not. Somewhere to our left, behind the dumpster, it answered. "We're leaving," Ben said. Not to the man, to us. We slid backward along the wall towards the chain link, eyes on hands, feet on the cleanest parts of the ground to avoid crunch. The man led us. He smiled again. "The roof was a good choice," he said. "Your routine was excellent. Your water catchment was efficient. The mirror trick was smart." He tilted his head. "But nothing is secret forever. If you want to sleep again, you come with us. We have a place." 2 weeks of whistling didn't make me sleep, I said, my voice calmer than my chest. "Your place would put me under your clock." He shrugged. "You're not wrong." Mara lifted the bolt cutter slightly in her hand, not as a threat, as a thing she might have to carry farther than she wanted. "We are going," she said. "Then go," he said, and stepped aside like a gentleman on a narrow sidewalk. "We'll see you around." We backed through the gate, slid the chain into place, as if a loop of steel could slow a decision, and took 3 quick turns through alleys and green spaces, until the world opened into a wide retention basin with the dry grass and the flat line of the interstate beyond. We dropped behind the berm. Only then did we breathe like normal humans again. We made camp under the lip of a bridge where the concrete deadened sound. Mara set a small piece of foil to reflect heat back from a tiny stove that burned alcohol in a soda can. Ben opened the sterile dressings and tucked them into a sealed bag. I set the revolver on the ground between my knees and looked at it without judgment. Ben looked at it too, paused on the cylinder. "Keep it," he said. "Keep it for the thing you can't lift or outthink." Mara watched the far line of the retention basin. "They let us go," she said. "Because we taught them something by going. They learned how we retreat." "I left the roof to stop being a pattern," I said. "Now I'm a pattern to them in a different direction." "That's the work now," she said. "Breaking your own patterns before someone else learns them. Choosing where to be visible and where to be invisible. Knowing when to make noise because the right noise pulls the right eyes." We ate a small meal that tasted like peace because no one was nearby. That night, we didn't hear whistling. We heard frogs and the distant tires of a truck on a highway that still carried the weight of people going somewhere. In the morning, Mara gave me the lesson she had promised: how to look at a block and read its history and scrapes and smudges. How to use the rise and fall of air to map where smell would go so you could avoid it. How to time your moves with the wind so you aren't the only thing announcing yourself. Ben showed me how to coil rope so it pays out without knots, how to anchor it to a car axle and not a bumper so it won't pull free, and how to test a length by feel. I helped them for 3 days. We retrieved supplies for a small group they were connected to without attaching ourselves to them. We avoided the watchers twice, once because Mara saw a reflection in a car window that didn't belong. Once because I heard a soft click on a radio and learned to tell it from thermal expansion or a stone hitting glass. In that time, I slept in 3 different places and never in the same pattern 2 nights in a row. I taught myself to fall asleep with my pack strap across my chest without hugging it, so if someone looked, I wouldn't advertise fear, and if someone grabbed, I'd feel it. On the 4th day, I told Mara I was going to take the service road toward the river and see if the camp she spoke of wanted a quiet person who could make water run in a gutter and sprouts grow in a bowl. She nodded without trying to sell me on staying. "If you hear the whistle again," she said, "don't answer and don't freeze, change your angle by 30 degrees and go. If it follows, it's for you. If it doesn't, it's for someone else. Either way, it's not your clock." Ben shook my hand with the dry grip of a man who conserved water and strength. "If you come back through this way," he said, "don't come back the same way. And if you find a place that feels like a home, don't tell anyone where it is, until they already know how to make one." I left with my pack lighter in food and heavier in knowledge. I moved along the river with the sound of water, a constant companion and a cover. I found the camp after 2 days, not because it advertised itself, but because I learned what to look for. Lines where grass lay flattened and then sprang back. Small piles of river stones that meant, "turn left at the next bend," and a smell like smoke carried under the canopy and not above it. I met people who had learned to plant between rocks so their food wasn't visible from the trail, who had strung line between trees to hang water filters and signal status without voices, who had posted small mirrors at odd angles to see behind them without looking like they were trying. I stayed a week. I patched a torn tarp. I built a better rain catchment from a broken kayak and a downspout taken from an abandoned shed. I taught a kid how to cut a MER blanket into strips and braid it with cord for a stronger tie. On the 8th day at 2:15 a.m., I woke for no reason and listened. There was no whistle. There was only the river and my breath and the small adjustment sounds sleep makes. Sometimes I tell myself a story about the person who left me the note. Maybe they were like me on a roof on their first week, thinking any plan was better than no plan. Maybe they had seen the watchers and didn't know the watchers were already looking back. Maybe they wrote a note because they needed to write a note to feel like the world could be pushed a little by paper and ink. I keep a small notebook in my pack. I write in it at night. I make lists with 2 columns: stay and go, wait and move, keep and leave. I draw diagrams of roofs and alleys. I note times and angles and which birds know where the food is. I've kept the note that isn't mine folded into the back page. It's a reminder that in the new world, someone is always drawing a line that includes you, without knowing all the way who you are. In the 2nd month, I saw a drone again, a consumer model with a camera that hovered above the tree line and then moved in a methodical grid. It hovered for a moment above the place where we filtered water and then drifted back toward town. I didn't whistle. I waited in shade. After it left, I changed where I filled the bottles and moved the mirror that caught sunlight too well. I don't know if I'll ever stop thinking in times now. The old world had a clock. The new one does too, but the hands are attention and risk. I've learned to move when those hands line up in the right way. I've learned to live without showing my whole shape on a skyline. I've learned that staying hidden doesn't mean staying still. It means understanding which parts of you can stay quiet while you choose the next place to make sound. There are nights at the river camp when someone sings very quietly. Not a whistle, not a pattern, just a human voice reminding itself what it sounds like. Those nights I sit with my back against a tree and let the sound carry to me and not through me. I make sure the tarp lines are tight. I make sure the water funnels won't flap. I set stones for morning. I close my eyes and watch the parking lot again, the street lights that ran dry, the cart corral that held shadows, the edge of the roof where I lay with my mirror and counted breaths. I wasn't safe there, but I learned things there that I can't learn anywhere else. One morning, months later, we heard a whistle from far downstream. It wasn't at 2:15 a.m., it wasn't a pattern, it was someone calling a dog. It rose and fell without meaning beyond that. We all looked at each other in the gray before dawn and smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't need teeth. We went back to work, quiet, watchful, and alive, not because the danger had passed, but because every day we choose which clocks we listen to. And that whistle didn't belong to us, we chose our own times and kept moving. We stayed hidden, not by vanishing, but by learning the map of attention and stepping where it wasn't. And when I sleep, when the frogs outnumber the thoughts, I remember the roof with a strange affection I didn't think I'd ever feel for a place that kept me and almost gave me away. It taught me to hear and to count, and to leave when leaving was the only way to stay. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.